Hey, this is Jerry. I'm 44 years old, and this is my story. Well, my story starts at a very young age, first in my mother's stomach, not knowing what this world was going to offer, but truly grateful that I'm sober today and that um, I got most of my mind back to enjoy this beautiful life that I was brought to. Well, in my life, started out being born to alcoholic parents, alcoholic families, uh, and all everything else. You guys know the story. Most of your families have been through it, or have witnessed it, or maybe even you're going through it. And so, in my childhood, I grew up with a lot of violence, a lot of parties, a lot of gatherings, a lot of funerals. But as I was a little kid, I always wanted to taste Budweiser or hams, and so I seen the hams. I wanted both of them. I just was like probably 3 years old, and I was at a party, and I just remember the green light on. You guys ever see a picture of all the dogs playing poker, trying to win money? And that's kind of how it was. It was my family, and I just remember I was in my diaper, and I went over there and I grabbed that ham's beer and I tasted it. Ugh, I spit it out. I spit it out. And then later on in life, when I was about 6 years old, my dad started to recover, started taking me to special places where many people met, men and women from all walks of life, and so I got to see that life, and never realizing that I would become an addict, never knew knowing that I'd become an alcoholic, and a lot of people on their next journey, as I like to say, because it's not over here. We're always on our next journey, and that's the hope, and that's what I live with. That one day we'll all be together. And so, growing up from that age, many of my relatives, and it continue to this day, it's a constant thing with friends and family and people I've met in recovery. And I made to the great age of 10 years old, living in the Dalles, Oregon, going to Joseph G. Wilson Elementary School. And I went through puberty really quick. And so I know I'm a very tall man. No, I'm not very tall. I'm an average man. But I was this tall. I was this big, just not with facial hair. At the age of 10, I went through puberty, had hair growing places I didn't think grew, and didn't understand. I just knew I was a very big kid, but I didn't also realize that I was having to adapt and to live life faster, so I grew up faster. And by the age of 13, I was deep into the gang activity. At the age of 10, I already had my first tattoo. People think the three dots represented my crazy life. It might have did that. Later on, it did, but at that time, it represented 213. And so, shout out to all the blue hearts and red hearts. I have love for all colors. And but at that time, it was just mainly that, and a lot of fighting, a lot of fighting with other people, and being this size, and at that age 10, my older cousins and friends, it was always would call on me, and it was my duty, even to my uncle's age, they would come and pick me up, and I knew what time it was, where it was time to go fight. And by the time I was age 13, uh, a lot of people were smoking marijuana and drinking and cigarettes, and I just loved to play basketball. And my mom and dad did the best ability. Awesome parents. Many of you guys know them. And but there was a time in our life that people just kind of like did focus on me, and so I would get home late. I'd stay out with my friends playing basketball because nobody cared for them. People loved us. They just didn't know how to take care of us at that time. And I started got in a bad car wreck, and so my mom and dad were focused on her. And before that, right before that, my best friend was killed, accidentally shot with a sawed-off shotgun. And he was my best friend. He eat top ramen noodles. It still affects me today. So every December 15th, I always stay busy. And to this day, I still help out on a community dinner. And I was honored to talk at that dinner this year. It was on the 14th. And my recovery date was December 16th. So those 2 days before was super hard for me. And stuff that I had caused in my own life to this day in sobriety, in my own actions. So from my own selfishness, really put a lot of pressure and on myself. And I just remember those last 2 hours. I made it, man. I made it. I made it. And my best friend, yeah, he was shot when I was 13. When he was 13 years old, and I just remember all the stuff that we planned. And at that time, uh, I was already getting into. They called it CR crank, and I was adapting to life to adapt with those items that were given to me, and with gifts and all kinds of other kind of stuff. And my friend, when I was 14 years old, started cooking it, and it blew off a roof, and it's all documented. And I wasn't involved in it, but he was my friend, and he went to jail for it. It blew off a roof right across the street from our school, Joseph G. Wilson. It was a duplex, and at that time there was several things taking place. A lady got her baby cut out of her stomach in Lyle. Two other men were hurt also in the process, and it brought tragedy to their families, and not just that, but it brought fear. And I think that fear is that part where the gang lifestyle uh, made me think I was strong, just because I knew those people, and and I was also sad because I also knew I just knew the lifestyle, I knew the victims, and and they were young, and having to survive. Not just here in the Dalles, but the whole Columbia River Gorge was kind of my whole playground, because as a little kid, I loved to go swimming. I loved to go to spearfish. I loved to go to the pocket. I loved to be all up and down the river, Toll Bridge, Hood River, jump off the bridges, and even in those things that adapted to my life, where there was with drugs and alcohol, I still continue those fun activities. And I'm really truly grateful to be alive, because there's sometimes we would be traveling places. I don't know how we'd make it back. But when I was 15 years old, still doing that, lifestyle, I met a woman, and she gave me a child. And by the time I even finished high school, I had two kids, and been together 29 years. And she was adapting that life. She had already adapted that life, coming out of Seattle, with several other kind of things, including heroin and other stuff that we learned to adapt to survive on the streets. And what I mean by that is to have somewhere to stay, to wash your clothes, to have food, um, and just to survive. Because sometimes you get caught up in things where people have you do things so you don't get hurt by those people. And back to that time when my first child was born, like I told you guys, my friend was doing something, the roof blew off. My relatives, their house got raided. People were like, "Oh my gosh, there was actual helicopters coming in," because they came in with helicopters and raided them. And what's it called? I turned 16 and I was partying with some people and the woman was at home and with my first child and they were like, "Jerry," I'm like, "Yeah," and they're like, Crank, we do big stuff like that. And there were several colors, pink, yellow, and peanut butter for those people that do relate. And I don't mean to bring back reminders of that or flashbacks, but it's a part of my testimony. And for you guys to understand that I was really there, those words that I said, people will understand because they were there too. And when I was 16, they're like, "There's this new thing called meth, crystal meth," and I'm like, "Oh yeah," and I'm drinking, and I want to stay up, I want to make it home, I want to do things, and because Coke wasn't doing it, and Coke would made my thing one night, and I freaked out. I was with this other girl, and she's like, "Oh, it's okay," because she was already in that adapted lifestyle, and but it wasn't okay for me because I'm a man, and I was like, "I'm not a man, you know what I'm saying?" And I told my friends, they didn't believe me, and it happened to them, and so I'm like, I'll just stick with the other stuff that will keep me going, the lie from the enemy, and because I'd always come down, I'd always sleep hard. If I was up for 3 days or a week, I'd always sleep hard, but I did a little bit of that, and my I got hot, whoo wee, and I was feeling good, and the next thing I know, his woman, she starts taking off her clothes, and I'm just like, "Oh shoot!" So my first reaction is just like, if it was a dirty movie or something, I was always told, "Look away," or you try to look, but you be like that, but I would really look away, and I look down, and I'm like, "Oh man, I don't want to disrespect my friend. He's a family friend. He's my brother. He's not a brother, but he's like a brother. And to this day, he's my brother. He's still alive and well and doing good. And I hope he sees the story because I never told him this part. But yeah, I was like, she put up a ladder because start cleaning the house, fixing things, and right when we started going live, I'm like, I'm out of here. And so I just went home and got told stuff. I didn't get told stuff because it was part of the adapted lifestyle. We thought it was normal. It was normal for me to go out and do these things and be in the streets as long as I made it back. And that lifestyle continued for a very long time. And there'd be times where I wouldn't be in that. I would be working a job, and still hiding it, still doing it and hiding it. With alcohol, though, you can do it in front of everybody. Even if I wasn't 21 years old, I could still have it. I still had access to it, and and people would take it and bring it to me, or I'd retrade, and that's what I mean, like the gifting part, like bartering system, and the bartering system that led to a partying system that led to a downfall, not just me, but all those around me, including my friends and their family. And many of them are in heaven, many of them are in jail, and there's a very few that are sober and well minded. And I continued that life for a long time, and I had no need to go to the bars because I always had access to everything that I basically wanted, and people and women, and so I didn't really start going to the bars until I started making music, and that took me on a whole other ride because it's like, okay, we're already going to be going out on Fridays and Saturdays, and throughout the week have house parties, and people would come, and big house parties, and that's not including the parties that I used to go to, drug parties, where you probably only think in movies, but there'd be tables just full of stuff, and just certain females that would just be in that room for that, and certain dealers or people that adapted to that lifestyle in those rooms, and guns and shootings and shot at, uh, that continued in our lives. There was a group of guys, and they were Norteños. I wore blue, but they were Norteños, and it wasn't about the color; it was all about the money. And I was friends with them, and they ended up fighting with some of my relatives, and some stuff happened, and eventually one of those guys ended up shooting at somebody by Les Schwab and going to prison, which I was thankful for because it was leading to a point where I was going to start battling with them, and and so like that's just one little story. One of my other partners shot three guys over at by Allen's Market, and his brother ended up stabbing somebody later on when I was working over at Churchgoers doing the pools and doing things there so I could stay awake and then hanging out the parks and staying in that same activity, that same lifestyle, and seeing where those were leading people to prison, to jail, to be away from their family. And then later on, continued in my selfishness and drinking and still wanting to stay up and still wanting to do things. It led to still doing, having Coke around and my woman doing Coke and then going and partying and hearing one of my songs on the radio in Yakima and the casino and just thinking I was having a good time. Like, oh, I'm gonna, I'm gonna get this fame and 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 then heading back to the Dalles, Oregon, and stopping at a restroom. I still remember it was the Solilo restroom, not the Village, not to get around because the Village had nothing to do with it. But when you go to the park, Solilo Park, there's a bathroom there, a couple of them, and they're always open. And we pulled in there because the girls had to go pee, and my girl was like, "Oh, I want some." She wanted some Coke, and so I'm in the next stall because I'd always go wherever the girls were. I'd go in the girls' bathroom. They'd let me go in there and I'd hang out with them. But I was on the toilet. I'm like, oh, they're gonna be doing some stuff, and I just heard this noise, whoo, wow, whoo, and I instantly knew that she had did meth accidentally, and I kind of got excited about it, and I was like, because I knew when I did, I got how I felt, I get horny and stuff, and so I was like, oh yeah, and she's just, oh, I'm so hot, and I rebuke any of these things that I'm talking about to anybody because I don't want the temptation. I don't want nobody to relapse. I want to be the best example. But I also want people to know my story and where I came from to give them hope and let them know that there is freedom, that you can have sobriety. And so she did that, and she was going to drop her off a friend, and her friend wanted to pay for some services for me and possibly stay with that person. But my mom's like, no, he's coming home with me. Sorry to the other female, and so I went with her, and it was like this for a long time, and we were just going at it in a good way, sexually, talking, everything, long walks, everything. But then guess what? There's always that downfall. There's always the come down, and we'd fight and argue. And I'd go one way, she'd go one way, and we'd come back, and then we'd go party somewhere. And it got to the point where I'm like, oh, it was just we were doing so much. It's like, oh, let's just go with some of the bong water. We'd meet one friend and we would do the bong water, and man, we would go on it 3 days, and I'd walk the streets crying, thinking she was getting attacked. She was probably coming down, and I wouldn't eat and stuff, and I wasn't already eating, so that wasn't healthy, and I was getting sick and tired of being sick and tired, and the thing about it is, like I said, you hurt those around you. Being the unhealthy tree, the unhealthy tree in this big forest of many plants and animals and beautiful creations. One of those beautiful creations were my kids, and there'd be times my son's like, I'm hungry. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll get you. I'll be back. It'd be like 5 hours would go by, 6 hours would go by, and I feel bad to this day about that. And later on, it wasn't just him; it was bad of my dogs and bills, and I was abandoning myself. And if you abandon yourself, you can't take care of yourself. That's just like what my mom told me. She's like, "How are you going to take care of yourself if you're drunk? How are you going to protect your woman? How are you going to protect your kids if you're being attacked if you're drunk?" Blacked out, or if I'm flailing out, boom. It's like I'd fall out, guy, and I'd hit my head on the toilet. I'd hit my head, boom. And later on in life, I was like, people would, even my mom or other people, would be like, "Are you on meth?" And I'm like, "No," and they could clearly see it because there was a time in my life uh, when I was 15 too. I got to go to Washington D.C. and talk to all the senators, and I told them about the crack epidemic and the needles, and they're like, "Oh, it's just politics." And at that time, Oregon was just red flagged, and I told them the stuff that I had to adapt to in life. I wasn't doing I wasn't doing the drugs not until after I went there, and because I was partying, and it started with coke, drinking and coke keep you up, and then drinking and cranks, and then meth, and but they said it's politics. That was going to take some time. And probably about 5 or 6 years later, half of America was red flagged at that time. And at that time, we were red flagged because we had a trade system that was coming up from down south that would go up and follow the seasons. So the Dallas, Oregon, we had the cherry season. Next was apple season going towards the valley. And so I told them about that, and not realizing that I would be a victim to what I was trying to save many people from. And it makes my heart sad because there's many young people and adults and people that have went in my sobriety, and I really wish that they would have listened. I really wish that they would have put a stop to it then. But it reminds me of where it comes from greed, and that's where crank, methamphetamines, alcohol, it goes to greed. It comes to us, and then we become greedy individuals, selfish, to fill our needs. I've been sober now 9 years, and I'm 44 years old. And so when I was 35 years old is when I started to walk the red road and started to go to several meeting places. And they have many names, but they're beautiful places of healing and freedom. And that's why the door is open for people to come to. And they love on you until you love yourself. Even today, it's hard sometimes to love on myself. So that's why I encourage everybody, when you first wake up in the morning, get that water. Because there's healing taking place. Even in these tears, there's many words and many prayers in my tears. And the one that hears and listens to him, he's going to answer him. He's listening to him now. Wake up in the morning, just wash your face off. I'm beautiful. Oh, I'm amazing. Oh, I'm awesome. Because you guys are. And Jerry, I am awesome. I am amazing. And those tears are for the people that can't tell themselves they're beautiful. And those tears are for the people that can't tell themselves they're awesome. Because that's what the rooms show you, whether it be church, whether it be the native church, and whether it be Wellbrighty, because there's many things that bring healing in all forms, and that's why I encourage anybody to go to those rooms of healing to have it. You know, they say to read a book. You might read the Bible. I read the Bible. I read many other books, but any book I read, I like to read it, be inspired by it, and do the action. And that's kind of how it is when we come into recovery. You come into those rooms, listen, be inspired, and then do the action. People can come up to me now today and be like, "Jerry, Were you a drug addict and adapted it to ways of things in your life that you had to do? I'm like, yes. But at one time, I'd probably be like, what you talking about? I'd be like, look at him with this look like, those are the codes of the streets. You don't ever say that. You know, you don't ever say that. You know, like, or just certain things, but that's not who I am. That's not my lifestyle that I am anymore. And there's so many stories I could tell you guys. So many stories. So many stories. And I can tell you this, that there's been over 200 people I have known that have made their next journey in recovery. That's why I get upset. In this past year, there's been several of my family members and friends. It's a constant thing. And why I get sad is because I was at one place and this is all healing. This is a divine appointment. These videos are divine. They're healing, very holy. Uh, and I shed tears because my best friend growing up, he was in prison, out of prison. God, we call it Dirty Heather. He was doing that. And my other cousin did 10 years for that too, and he got out and he lost his mind. But he didn't fully lose his mind because he's like, I know they put a chip in me. And he got paid from the state because they really did put a chip in him because he was a gang member. They're what's it called? Like their own thing, but it's all documented. They paid him. And but my other friend, my best friend, my third best friend from my, back to the story of my best friend that got killed when he was 13. My other best friend out of our three trio. And there was a big group of us. There's two of us left out of everybody. I know, three of us. And he he wanted sobriety. He came to my place. I heard this knock at the door. And I was like, I can't let you in, man, 'cause I have big dogs. And we talked outside. I asked him if he knew the Lord. And he's like, yeah, man. We talked. And I said, come by anytime. We smoked some cigarettes. He came back again. And he told me he wanted a job. So I got him some shirts. And I was helping him out the best way I can. And he brought me some gifts to hold on to him. Some items that he wanted to save for his kids. That because he had babies with my cousin. That's how close we were best friends. Like I had babies with his cousin, and then he ended up having babies with my cousin later on in life. But what I'm coming to is like he wanted sobriety, and he was going to finally make it to one of those rooms of healing. He was going to come that Monday, but he didn't make it because they don't have certain regulations at the hospital for when people do overdose on fentanyl, or so they thought he was good enough to release him back to home, and he didn't make it. And the reason why I know this is because I've had to give Narcan to people. I've had to sit by people through the night, and we took them to the hospital, and then they released them. That they're all right, and the next thing you know, they're overdosing down the street from. And I'm not blaming the hospital. There's new regulations, just like the politics and changing the laws and focusing on things that we need to focus on. Like I was telling you guys when I was 15, like if we were to focus on the meth epidemic then and the heroin epidemic then, maybe things would have changed. And these regulations, some things need to change or are put into place because like even some of my families I had to watch with them, they were took them from the ambulance where I've raced back from Portland back here and then made it to the hospital and they're doing all right. The signs are going to, and then get down the street and they're overdosing. Even where the police show up, they're like, "Oh, they must have did it again," and we're like, "No, we were with them from the hospital. They're overdosing again, and we had to give them more Narcan." And I gave it to them, and and that's when we started adding up all the pieces from all of our relatives within this past year and the years before that have overdosed. And what the thing was is they were sending them home, and they were overdosing at home. And so we need to stand together, and we need to remember that we have a voice, and that's why we're here today, and that's why these videos are going out, so our voices are heard, and One thing that helps me now in my recovery is talking and going to those healing places and going back to the water and enjoying life again because life is short. And one thing I learned was life is good. Life is good even in the bad times, the sad times, the morning time. Life is good because I get to live it. I get to live it today sober and with a clear mind. And so I paddle as much as I can. I try to go out to nature as much as I can. And, uh, and it feels good to be Jerry. It feels good to be able to be a man and be able to cry if I need to cry. And it feels good to be able to smile. And it feels good to tell people that it's going to be okay because it will be okay. Not in Jerry's timing, not in your timing, but on the Creator's timing.